Maya Rodriguez stood at the bus stop, her guitar case heavy in her hand. The morning sun was just coming up, and she could see her breath in the cold air. She had been awake since 4 in the morning, too excited and nervous to sleep. Today was the day she had been dreaming about for months, the talent show auditions at Lincoln High School. Her worn sneakers had holes in them, and her jeans were faded from too many washes. The guitar case she carried was old and scratched, bought from a pawn shop 3 years ago with money she had saved from helping her neighbor Mrs. Patterson with her grocery shopping. But inside that beat-up case was her most precious possession, a guitar that had become her best friend and her escape from all the troubles at home. When the school bus finally arrived, Maya climbed on and found her usual seat in the back. She watched the other students getting on at each stop, noticing how different they all looked. Some carried expensive instrument cases that probably cost more than her family made in a month. Others wore brand-name clothes and shoes that looked like they had just come from the store. Maya pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself and tried not to think about how out of place she felt. The bus ride to school took 25 minutes, and Maya spent most of it staring out the window, thinking about the song she planned to perform. She had written it herself, late at night, when her mother was working her second job at the hospital. The song was called "Dreams Don't Cost Money," and it told the story of a girl who refused to give up even when life got hard. Maya lived with her mother in a small apartment above Mr. Chun's grocery store. The walls were thin, and she could hear everything that happened in the apartments next to theirs. That's why she always played her guitar softly, especially at night. She didn't want to bother anyone, but music was the only thing that made her feel better when things got tough. Her mother, Carmen, worked 2 jobs to keep them going. During the day, she cleaned office buildings downtown. At night, she worked at the local hospital, mopping floors and emptying trash cans. Carmen always came home tired, her hands red and rough from all the cleaning chemicals, but she never complained. Instead, she would sit on their old couch and listen to Maya play guitar, a smile spreading across her tired face. "You have a gift, Mia," her mother would say in Spanish, her voice full of love and pride. "Don't let anyone tell you it's not worth anything." Maya's father had left when she was 13. One day he was there, and the next day he wasn't. He left behind some unpaid bills and empty promises that he would come back soon. That was 3 years ago, and Maya had stopped waiting for him to keep his word. She learned to be strong for her mother, who cried quietly in the kitchen when she thought Maya wasn't listening. Money was always tight in their house. There were weeks when they ate rice and beans for dinner every night, because that's all they could afford. Maya learned to shop carefully, looking for the cheapest prices and using coupons her mother cut from old newspapers. She never asked for new clothes or expensive things like her classmates had. She knew her mother was already doing everything she could, but music was different. Music was free. Maya taught herself to play guitar by watching videos on the old computer at the public library. She learned chord progressions during her lunch breaks at school and practiced until her fingers were sore. When she couldn't afford new guitar strings, she would carefully clean the old ones and make them last as long as possible. At school, Maya kept to herself most of the time. She ate lunch alone in the library, where it was quiet and she could read or work on her homework. She watched the popular kids from a distance, noticing how easy everything seemed for them. They had new phones, nice cars, and parents who came to every school event. Maya's mother wanted to come to school events too, but she was usually working. The other students at Lincoln High didn't really notice Maya. She wasn't mean or causing trouble, so teachers left her alone. She got good grades because she knew education was her ticket to a better life. Her mother always reminded her that school was important, even though Carmen herself had only finished 8th grade before she had to start working to help her own family. Maya had a part-time job at Rosie's Diner, a small restaurant near the bus station. She worked there after school and on weekends, washing dishes and wiping down tables. The pay wasn't much, but every dollar helped. She gave most of her earnings to her mother for rent and groceries, but she always kept a little bit aside. She was saving for new guitar strings and maybe, someday, a better guitar. Rosie, the owner of the diner, was kind to Maya. She was an older woman who had run the restaurant for 30 years. Sometimes, when the diner was empty, Rosie would let Maya sit in one of the booths and play her guitar quietly. A few customers would stop and listen, and some even left tips in Maya's guitar case. Those were the best days. It was at the diner that Maya had heard about the talent show. She was cleaning tables when she overheard two students from her school talking about auditions. Her heart started beating faster as she listened to them discuss what songs they were going to perform and what they were going to wear. When they left, Maya asked Rosie if she had heard anything about it. "Oh, yes, honey," Rosie said, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's a big deal at the high school. The winner gets a cash prize and gets to perform at the spring festival. You should try out. You've got more talent in your little finger than most people have in their whole body." Maya felt a flutter of excitement and fear in her stomach. A cash prize would help her mother so much, and performing at the spring festival? That was like a dream come true. But she also knew that the other students auditioning would be nothing like her. They would have professional training, expensive instruments, and confidence that came from never having to worry about money. For weeks, Maya thought about whether she should audition. She practiced her song over and over, making small changes to make it perfect. She imagined herself on stage, sharing her music with an audience who actually wanted to listen. But she also imagined the looks she would get from the other students, the whispers about the poor girl who thought she belonged with them. Finally, her mother noticed that something was bothering her. One night, as Maya sat at their small kitchen table doing homework, Carmen sat down across from her. "What's wrong, Mia? You've been quiet for days." Maya told her mother about the talent show, about her fears and her hopes. Carmen listened carefully, nodding as Maya explained why she wanted to try, but also why she was scared. When Maya finished talking, her mother reached across the table and took her hands. "Maya, I clean buildings where rich people work every day. I see how they live, how easy their lives are. But you know what I've learned? Money can buy you nice things, but it can't buy you talent. It can't buy you heart. And you, my daughter, have both of those things." That conversation gave Maya the courage she needed. She decided to audition, no matter what happened. She spent her last few dollars on a new shirt from the thrift store and polished her old guitar until it shined as much as it could now. As the school bus pulled into the parking lot, Maya felt her stomach full of butterflies. Students were already walking toward the main building, many of them carrying instrument cases and looking confident. Maya took a deep breath, picked up her guitar case, and stepped off the bus. Today was the day she would finally share her music with the world, even if that world didn't think she belonged in it. Maya walked through the school hallways, her guitar case bumping against her leg with each step. The auditorium was just ahead, and she could already hear music coming from inside. Her palms were sweaty, and she kept switching her guitar case from one hand to the other. Students were gathered in small groups outside the auditorium doors, and Maya could tell right away that she was different from all of them. A girl with perfectly styled blonde hair was practicing vocal scales, her voice strong and trained. Next to her stood a boy with an expensive electric guitar, the kind Maya had only seen in music store windows. His guitar case had stickers from music camps and competitions all over it. Another group of students were stretching in matching dance. outfits that looked like they cost more than Maya's mother made in a week. Maya found a quiet spot near the wall and opened her guitar case to check her instrument one more time. The guitar looked even more worn and old compared to everything around her. She had tried to clean it as much as possible that morning, but the scratches and dents from years of use were still visible. Her fingers traced the familiar marks on the wood, each one telling a story of late nights practicing and dreams that felt too big for her small world. "Next group, please come in for warm-ups," called out a student with a clipboard. Maya recognized her as Ashley Chun, the student council, president and daughter of the family that owned the biggest car dealership in town. Ashley's clipboard was covered in expensive stickers, and her outfit probably cost more than Maya's family spent on groceries in a month. Maya followed the group into the auditorium, and her breath caught in her throat. The space was huge, with red velvet seats and a stage that looked like something from a real theater. Professional lighting equipment was set up, and there were cameras to record the auditions. Maya had never seen anything so fancy in her life that the students spread out across the auditorium, and Maya could hear conversations about private music lessons, summer camps, and expensive instruments. A girl near her was complaining to her friend about how her violin teacher was making her practice 4 hours a day. Another student was talking about the recording studio his parents had built in their basement so he could practice any time he wanted. Maya sat down in one of the back rows and watched as students began their practice routines. The blonde girl she had seen outside was now on stage, running through what looked like a professionally choreographed performance. Her voice filled the entire auditorium, and Maya could tell she had been taking lessons for years. Everything about her performance was polished and perfect. "Wow, Crystal is going to be hard to beat," whispered a student sitting a few seats away from Maya. Her mom hired that voice coach from the city, the one who works with people on those singing shows on TV. Maya's stomach started to feel sick. She looked down at her simple outfit and her old guitar, and suddenly everything felt impossible. These students had professional training, expensive equipment, and confidence that came from years of being told they were special. Maya had learned everything from library books and internet videos, but she tried to stay positive. She thought about her mother, who was probably at work right now, cleaning offices and thinking about Maya's audition. She thought about all the nights she had practiced quietly in their small apartment, dreaming of this moment. She couldn't give up now. The auditions began, and Maya watched in amazement as student after student took the stage. There was a boy who played piano like he had been born to do it, his fingers dancing across the keys without any effort. A group of dancers moved together perfectly, like they had been practicing together for years. A girl played violin so beautifully that Maya felt tears in her eyes. Each performance was more impressive than the last. Maya started to feel smaller and smaller in her seat. She looked around the auditorium and noticed that all the parents in the audience were well-dressed and looked comfortable in this fancy setting. They held expensive cameras and smiled proudly as their children performed. Maya's mother couldn't be here because she was working, but even if she could have come, Maya wondered if she would have felt out of place too. "Maya Rodriguez," Ashley called out, reading from her clipboard. Maya's heart jumped into her throat. She stood up slowly and walked toward the stage, feeling like everyone was watching her. She could hear whispers from some of the other students, and she tried not to listen to what they were saying. As Maya walked onto the stage, she noticed that the lights were brighter than she had expected. She couldn't see the audience very well, but she could feel their eyes on her. She sat down on the stool in the center of the stage and carefully took her guitar out of its case. The instrument looked even more old and worn under the bright lights. Maya was just about to start tuning her guitar when she heard a voice from the audience. It was loud enough for everyone to hear, and it made her freeze. Seriously? Are we really doing this? The voice belonged to Jessica Morrison, one of the most popular girls in school. Jessica's father owned 3 restaurants in town, and her mother was on the school board. Jessica always wore designer clothes and drove a car that was newer than most teachers' cars. Maya's face turned red with embarrassment. She looked up from her guitar and saw Jessica sitting in the front row with her group of friends. They were all looking at Maya like she was some kind of joke. I mean, come on, Jessica continued, her voice carrying across the quiet auditorium. We're supposed to be showcasing real talent here. This is embarrassing. Jessica's friends started giggling, and Maya felt like she might throw up. She looked toward the student organizers, hoping they would tell Jessica to be quiet, but instead they looked uncomfortable and kept glancing at each other. Maybe we should move things along, said Tyler Brooks, the head of the organizing committee. His family had donated money to build the new auditorium, and everyone knew it. We have a lot of serious auditions to get through today. Maya felt her world crashing down around her. She hadn't even played a single note, and already she was being dismissed. The months of practice, the dreams she had shared with her mother, a hope she had carried with her all day, it all seemed to disappear in an instant. But I haven't even played yet, Maya said quietly, her voice barely loud enough for anyone to hear. Look, honey, Ashley said, walking over to Maya with her clipboard. We're really looking for more ... polished acts. Students who have been training professionally. Maybe you could try again next year when you've had more time to prepare. Words hit Maya like a slap in the face. She looked around the auditorium and saw some students looking at her with pity, others with annoyance. Jessica was still smirking, clearly pleased with herself for speaking up. Maya's hands were shaking as she put her guitar back in its case. She had never felt so small and worthless in her entire life. All around her were students who belonged. In this world of expensive instruments and professional training, she was just a poor girl with a dream that was too big for someone like her. She stood up from the stool and walked off the stage, her guitar case feeling heavier than ever. The auditorium was quiet, except for the sound of her footsteps echoing off the walls. As she reached the exit, she could hear the organizers already calling the next student to the stage. Maya pushed through the heavy auditorium doors and found herself back in the school hallway. Her eyes were burning with tears that she was trying hard not to let fall. She had been so stupid to think she could compete with students like these. She had been foolish to believe that talent mattered more than money and connections. As she walked toward the main exit, Maya felt like she was carrying the weight of all her broken dreams. Maya pushed through the heavy school doors and walked outside, her guitar case clutched tightly in her hand. The afternoon air felt cold against her burning cheeks, and she could barely see where she was going through the tears that were starting to fall. She had never felt so humiliated in her entire life. She found the concrete steps that led up to the main entrance and sat down heavily, not caring that the cold stone made her even more uncomfortable. Maya set her guitar case beside her and put her head in her hands. All those months of dreaming, all those nights practicing quietly so she wouldn't wake the neighbors, all those hopes she had shared with her mother, it all felt like a cruel joke now. The worst part wasn't even that she had been rejected. The worst part was that she hadn't even been given a chance. She had walked onto that stage, ready to pour her heart out through her music, ready to show everyone what she could do, and they had dismissed her before she could play a single note. Jessica's words kept echoing in her head, making her feel smaller each time she remembered them. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and tried to think about what she would tell her mother. Carmen had been so excited that morning, making Maya's favorite breakfast and wishing her good luck at least 10 times before Maya left for school. How could she explain that she never even got to audition? How could she tell her mother that? The other students thought she was embarrassing? The sound of the school doors opening made Maya look up. Students were starting to come outside, probably taking a break between auditions. Maya quickly wiped her face again and tried to make herself smaller on the steps. She didn't want anyone to see her crying. She especially didn't want Jessica or any of her friends to see her like this. But it wasn't Jessica or any of the students who had come outside. It was a man Maya had never seen before, someone who definitely didn't belong at Lincoln High School. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair and an expensive-looking suit. He walked with the kind of confidence that Maya had only seen in movies, like he was used to people listening to him when he spoke. The man looked around for a moment, and his eyes found Maya sitting on the steps. She expected him to walk past her like most adults did, but instead he started walking in her direction. Maya felt nervous. She wasn't used to strangers talking to her, especially strangers who looked as important as this man did. "Excuse me," the man said gently when he reached the steps. His voice was kind, not at all what Maya had expected. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but were you just in the auditorium for the talent show?" Maya nodded, not trusting her voice to work properly. She probably looked terrible with her red eyes and messy hair. She wondered why this well-dressed stranger would want to talk to her. "I'm Richard Sterling," the man said, sitting down on the steps a respectful distance from Maya. "I was in the back of the auditorium for a meeting about a scholarship program. I saw what happened in there, and I have to say, I didn't think it was very fair." Maya looked at him in surprise. Nobody had ever stood up for her before, especially not someone who looked like he had money and power. She had gotten used to fighting her own battles, to being invisible to people who mattered. "It's okay," Maya said quietly, though her voice shook a little. "I probably didn't belong in there anyway. Those other kids are really talented." Richard's eyebrows went up. "What makes you think you don't belong?" "From what I could see, you were the only one who didn't get a chance to show what you could do." Maya felt fresh tears starting to form in her eyes. She looked down at her old guitar case and shrugged. "Look at me," she said. "Look at my guitar. Those kids have been taking lessons since they were little. They have parents who can pay for professional training and expensive instruments. I learned everything from books and videos online." Richard was quiet for a moment, and Maya worried that she had said too much. She wasn't used to talking to strangers about her problems, especially strangers who looked like they had never worried about money in their lives. "Can I tell you something?" Richard said finally. "I grew up in a neighborhood a lot like yours. My family didn't have money for music lessons or fancy instruments either. When I was your age, I wanted to start a small business, but nobody would take me seriously because of where I came from and how I looked." Maya looked at him with surprise. This man in his expensive suit had grown up poor? It was hard to believe, but something in his eyes told her he was telling the truth. "What happened?" Maya asked, curious despite her sadness. "Well, I almost gave up," Richard said with a small smile. "I almost decided that people like me weren't meant to succeed in business. But then I met someone who believed in me when nobody else would. One person who saw past my old clothes and my lack of connections, and recognized that I had something valuable to offer." Richard looked at Maya's guitar case and then back at her face. "That person changed my life by giving me a chance when everyone else had written me off. And now, years later, I own a company that makes millions of dollars every year. But I never forgot how it felt to be dismissed before anyone even knew what I was capable of." Maya stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. This successful businessman had once been like her, had once felt the same shame and rejection that she was feeling right now. "The thing is," Richard continued, "I've learned that real Talent doesn't come from expensive lessons or fancy equipment. It comes from here, he pointed to his heart, and here, he pointed to his head. It comes from having something genuine to say, and the courage to say it, even when the world doesn't seem interested in listening. Maya felt something stirring inside her chest, a small spark of hope that she had thought was completely gone. "I have an idea," Richard said, standing up from the steps. "Would you be willing to play something for me? Right here, right now? I promise you'll have an audience who actually wants to listen." Maya looked around the empty area in front of the school. "Here? Outside? Why not?" Richard said with a grin. "Some of the best music I've ever heard was played in places that weren't fancy concert halls. Sometimes the most beautiful songs are the ones that come from real life, from real struggles, from people who have something important to say." Maya felt her heart beating faster. Part of her wanted to pack up her guitar and go home, to hide in her room and never try to perform again. But another part of her, the part that had been writing songs and practicing for months, wasn't ready to give up. She looked at Richard's kind face and saw something she hadn't seen all day, genuine interest and respect. He wasn't looking at her old clothes or her scratched guitar case. He was looking at her like she was a person who mattered, like she had something valuable to offer the world. "I wrote the song myself," Maya said softly, her hands moving to the latches on her guitar case. "Even better," Richard said, settling back onto the steps. "Original music is the most honest kind. It tells us who you really are." With shaking hands, Maya opened her guitar case and lifted out her instrument. The guitar felt familiar and comforting in her arms, like an old friend who had never let her down. She took a deep breath and looked at Richard, who was watching her with encouraging eyes. For the first time all day, Maya felt like someone actually wanted to hear what she had to say. Maya's fingers found the familiar position on her guitar neck, and she strummed a few quiet chords to make sure everything was in tune. The afternoon sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the school parking lot. A few students were walking to their cars in the distance, but Maya tried not to think about them. For the first time all day, she felt like she could focus on just her music. Richard sat patiently on the steps, his hands folded in his lap. There was something about the way he waited that made Maya feel comfortable. He wasn't checking his watch or looking at his phone like most adults did. He was just sitting there, ready to listen, like her music was the most important thing in the world right now. Maya took a deep breath and began to play. The first few notes of "Dreams Don't Cost Money" floated through the air, soft and clear. Her voice was shaky at first, but as she got into the song, it grew stronger. The words came from deep inside her heart, telling the story of a girl who refused to give up even when everything seemed impossible. As Maya sang, she forgot about the fancy auditorium inside. She forgot about Jessica's cruel words and the organizers, who had dismissed her. She forgot about her old clothes and her scratched guitar. All that mattered was the music flowing through her, the story she was telling through her song. The lyrics talked about working late at night while dreaming of something better. They talked about a mother who worked 2 jobs and still found time to encourage her daughter. They talked about hope that lived in a small apartment above a grocery store, hope that couldn't be bought or sold, only felt and shared. Richard listened with his eyes closed, letting the music wash over him. Maya could see that her song was affecting him, and it gave her the confidence to sing even stronger. Her voice carried across the empty space in front of the school, pure and honest and full of emotion that couldn't be taught in any expensive music class. When Maya finished the last note, there was a moment of perfect silence. Then Richard opened his eyes and looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. It was respect, amazement, and something else that took Maya a moment to recognize. It was the look her mother got when Maya played at home. Pure pride. That was incredible, Richard said, and Maya could hear that he meant every word. Maya, that wasn't just a song. That was art. That was truth. That was everything music is supposed to be. Maya felt her cheeks getting warm, but this time it was from happiness instead of embarrassment. Nobody had ever talked about her music like that before. Even her mother, who loved and supported her, had never used words like art to describe her songs. You really think it was good? Maya asked, still hardly believing what was happening. Good? Richard shook his head. Maya, I've been to concert halls and fancy theaters all over the world. I've heard singers who charge thousands of dollars for a single performance. And I can honestly say that what you just did was more moving than anything I've heard in years. Richard stood up from the steps and started pacing back and forth like he was thinking hard about something. Maya watched him, wondering what was going through his mind. Those kids in there, Richard said, gesturing toward the school, they have technical skill. They've been trained well. But you know what they don't have? They don't have what you have. They don't have a story that matters. They don't have real emotion. They don't have authenticity. Maya had never heard anyone use big words like that to talk about her music. She wasn't even sure what authenticity meant, but the way Richard said it made it sound important. Can I ask you something? Richard continued. How long have you been writing songs? About 2 years, Maya answered. I started after my dad left. Music was the only thing that made me feel better. Richard nodded like that made perfect sense. To him, and you've never had professional lessons? Maya shook her head. We can't afford them. I learned everything from library books and videos online. Sometimes Rosie at the diner where I work lets me practice there when it's not busy. Unbelievable, Richard muttered, but he was smiling. Maya, do you realize what you've accomplished? You've taught yourself not just to play guitar, but to write original music that can move people to tears. Most professional songwriters never learn to do what you just did. Maya felt like she was in a dream. This morning, she had been just another poor kid who didn't fit in at school. Now, a successful businessman was telling her she had real talent. It felt too good to be true. There's something I need to tell you, Richard said, his voice getting more serious. I didn't just happen to be at your school today. I was there for a specific reason, and after hearing you sing, I think it might be fate. Maya looked at him curiously, waiting for him to explain. I run a scholarship program for talented students who come from backgrounds like yours, Richard continued. Students who have ability, but haven't had the same opportunities as their wealthier classmates. I was at your school today to meet with the principal about expanding the program. Maya's heart started beating faster. A scholarship program? For students like her? But here's the thing, Richard went on. I've been looking for someone special. Someone with raw talent and genuine heart. Someone who could represent what this program's really about. Maya, I think that someone might be you. Maya stared at him, hardly able to process what she was hearing. What do you mean? Richard sat back down on the steps next to her. I mean that I want to help you develop your talent the way it deserves to be developed. Music lessons with the best teachers. Professional recording equipment. Opportunities to perform for audiences who will appreciate what you can do. Maya felt dizzy. This had to be some kind of mistake. Things like this didn't happen to girls like her. But first, Richard said, standing up again, I think those kids in there need to hear what I just heard. They need to understand what real talent sounds like. Maya's stomach dropped. You mean go back in there? After what happened? That's exactly what I mean, Richard said, his voice full of determination. Maya, you've spent your whole life being told you don't belong in certain places. But you know what? That auditorium belongs to you just as much as it belongs to anyone else. Your tax dollars help pay for that school. Your dreams are just as valid as theirs. Maya looked at her guitar, then back at Richard. Part of her was terrified of facing Jessica and the other students again. But another part of her, the part that had written songs about never giving up, was starting to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. It was courage. What if they reject me again? Maya asked. Richard smiled. Then they'll be making the same mistake twice. But Maya, I won't let that happen. I'm going to make sure you get the audition you deserve. And when you do, you're going to show them something they've never seen before. Maya took a deep breath and started putting her guitar back in its case. Her hands were shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from excitement. Okay, she said quietly. Let's go back in there. Richard's smile got even bigger. That's the spirit. Maya, you're about to change some people's minds about what real talent looks like. Maya and Richard walked back through the school hallways, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Maya's guitar case felt different in her hand now. Not heavy with shame like before, but light with possibility. Still, her stomach was doing flips. As they got closer to the auditorium, she could hear music coming from inside, which meant the auditions were still going on. Richard stopped just before they reached the doors. Maya, I want you to remember something, he said, looking directly into her eyes. You belong in there just as much as anyone else. More than that, you have something special that they need to hear. Don't let anyone make you feel small again. Maya nodded, trying to absorb his confidence. She had spent so many years feeling invisible, feeling like she didn't matter. It was hard to believe that could change in just one afternoon. Richard pushed open the auditorium doors, and Maya followed him inside. The room was still full of students and parents, but something felt different this time. Maybe it was because Richard was walking beside her, or maybe it was because she had finally gotten to share her music with someone who understood it. Either way, Maya felt stronger than she had that morning. They made their way down the aisle, and Maya noticed heads turning to look at them. Students were whispering to each other, probably wondering who the man in the expensive suit was, and why he was with the girl who had been dismissed earlier. Ashley Chun was on stage, announcing the next performer when she noticed Richard approaching. Her eyes got wide, and Maya could see her trying to figure out who this important-looking stranger was. "Excuse me," Richard said in a voice that carried easily across the auditorium. It wasn't loud, but it had the kind of authority that made everyone stop what they were doing and pay attention. "I need to speak with whoever is organizing this event." Ashley looked around nervously and then pointed to Tyler Brooks, who was sitting in the front row with his clipboard and volunteer badge. Tyler stood up quickly, smoothing down his shirt and walking over to meet Richard. "Hi, I'm Tyler Brooks, head of the organizing committee," Tyler said, extending his hand. Maya could see that he was trying to look confident, but his voice was a little shaky. "Richard Sterling," Richard replied, shaking Tyler's hand. "I'm here about a scholarship program my foundation runs in partnership with your school district." Maya watched as Tyler's face changed. Obviously, he recognized the name or understood that this was someone important. Other students and parents were starting to pay attention too, sensing that something significant was happening. "Mr. Sterling, it's an honor to meet you," Tyler said, his voice much more respectful now. "What can we do for you?" Richard gestured toward Maya. "I believe this young lady was dismissed from your auditions earlier without being given a proper chance to perform. I'd like to rectify that situation." The auditorium got very quiet. Maya could feel dozens of eyes on her, and she saw Jessica Morrison sitting with her group of friends, looking shocked and a little worried. "Oh, well," Tyler stammered, glancing around like he was looking for help. "I mean, we have our procedures, and the schedule is pretty full." "I'm sure you can make an exception," Richard said calmly, "especially since it appears there was an oversight in your selection process. Maya noticed that other adults in the audience were starting to whisper among themselves. She could see parents pulling out their phones, probably looking up Richard's name to figure out who he was. The principal, Dr. Martinez, had been sitting in the back row and was now making her way toward the front of the auditorium. "Mr. Sterling," Dr. Martinez said as she reached them. "What a surprise to see you here. I thought our meeting was scheduled for next week." "It was," Richard replied. "But sometimes the most important discoveries happen when you least expect them." He looked at Maya with a smile. "I'd like this young lady to have the audition she was denied earlier." Dr. Martinez looked at Maya, then at Tyler, then back at Richard. Maya could practically see her mind working, trying to figure out how to handle this situation. Everyone in the auditorium was watching now, waiting to see what would happen. "Of course," Dr. Martinez said finally. "Tyler, please make sure Maya gets her audition." Tyler nodded quickly. "Absolutely. Maya, would you like to take the stage?" Maya looked at Richard, who gave her an encouraging nod. Then she looked out at the audience, full of students and parents who had ignored her before. This time, though, they were all paying attention. This time, they were going to listen. Maya walked onto the stage, her guitar case in hand. The lights seemed less blinding than before, maybe because she wasn't as scared. She sat down on the stool and carefully took out her guitar, the same scratched and worn instrument that had been dismissed just hours earlier. But something had changed in the auditorium. The whispers had stopped. Even Jessica and her friends were sitting quietly, waiting to see what would happen. Maya realized that Richard's presence had given her something she had never had before: respect. People were taking her seriously now, and she wasn't going to waste this chance. Maya strummed a few chords and looked out at the audience. For a moment, she thought about her mother, who was probably still at work, not knowing that her daughters' life was about to change forever. Then Maya began to sing "Dreams Don't Cost Money." Her voice filled the auditorium, clear and strong and full of emotion. The song told her story, the story of a girl who worked hard and dreamed big despite having very little. It talked about late nights and early mornings, about a mother who sacrificed everything for her daughter, about hope that couldn't be bought or sold. As Maya sang, she watched the faces in the audience change. Students who had been checking their phones were now listening intently. Parents who had been chatting quietly were leaning forward in their seats. Even Jessica Morrison was staring at the stage, with her mouth slightly open. Maya's voice grew stronger with each verse. She sang about the diner where she worked, about the small apartment where she practiced quietly so she wouldn't disturb the neighbors. She sang about dreams that seemed impossible but felt too important to give up. When Maya reached the chorus, something magical happened. Her voice soared through the auditorium, carrying every emotion she had ever felt. The pain of being different, the joy of creating music, the determination to keep going no matter what. It was all there in her song. Maya finished the last note and let it hang in the air for a moment. The auditorium was completely silent. For a few seconds, nobody moved or spoke. Maya wondered if she had done something wrong. Then the applause started. It began with Richard, who was clapping enthusiastically from his seat. Then other people joined in, and soon the entire auditorium was filled with the sound of clapping. But it wasn't just polite applause like Maya had heard for the other performers. This was different. This was real. Maya looked out at the audience and saw tears in some people's eyes. She saw students who had never noticed her before nodding their heads in appreciation. Even some of the parents were wiping their eyes. The applause went on for what felt like forever. Maya stood up from her stool and held her guitar, hardly believing what was happening. Ashley Chun walked onto the stage with tears streaming down her face. "That was beautiful," Ashley said into the microphone. Absolutely beautiful. Maya looked out at the audience and found Richard. He was standing now, still clapping, with the biggest smile she had ever seen. Next to him, Dr. Martinez was applauding enthusiastically. Even Tyler Brooks was on his feet. For the first time in her life, Maya felt like she truly belonged somewhere. She had found her voice, and people were listening.